The Securities and Exchange Commission alleged in an indictment that Phil Mickelson made $931,000 after purchasing stock on an insider trading tip. Mickelson was not criminally charged. The SEC alleged that Mickelson bought stock in a company in 2012 after receiving a tip from sports gambler Billy Walters. He allegedly used part of the profit to pay money he owed to Walters, with whom he'd placed bets. Walters was criminally charged with insider trading. Now, an SEC spokesman says Mickelson has agreed to pay over $1 million, his profits, plus interest. Skip, should this hurt Mickelson's image?
Stephen A., yes, it should. And Molly, yes, it should. I'll preface everything I'm going to say by maybe disqualifying myself. I've never been a big Phil fan. I've always, and I've said this many times on this show, always considered him to come off as a little bit of a phony to me, to be not exactly what he comes off or the image that he portrays. Too much of America as sort of the husband and father next door. Not that he isn't a great husband and a great father, but there's just something that's phony about his smile to me, Stephen A., that I've never bought into. I've argued with my mom for years about this. She loves Phil Mickelson. And I say, yeah, there's just something I don't quite buy into with him. So now this happens. And to answer this question from an expert point of view, I read a quote this morning from an advertising executive in USA Today. And the quote was, given that Phil was an unknowing accomplice to all this, and wasn't knowingly breaking the law, I don't see this affecting his marketability. So that's somebody who knows this game far better than I do. And Phil's got some big money marketing accounts. You know all of them, Rolex and Exxon Mobil, and we could go on and on.
Amgen.
Yeah, you got it.
It's a pharmaceutical company, man. They paying that man tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah. Forbes said last year that Phil Mickelson made $51 million. So now, let's look at what just happened. Molly detailed it, but I'm going to go back through it quickly. So Phil buys $7.4 million worth of stock of Dean Foods. This is late in 2012. That was by far the largest stock purchase he had ever made, according to the SEC investigation. An executive at Dean Foods was feeding info to Billy Walters, who's widely regarded, Walters, I'm sorry. Widely regarded as one of the most successful sports bettors ever in this country. So the stock immediately soars 40%, and Phil immediately sells off all of his stock and makes this, obviously huge profit. And some of that was used, according to this SEC filing against Phil, was used to repay a gambling debt to Billy Walters. Okay? Now, to me, that's the definition of insider trading, but Phil was his people or his attorneys are sort of qualifying this as he was an innocent bystander to the point of almost being a victim of all this, that he had no idea what was really going on here. I got to tell you, Phil Mickelson is a shrewd operator. He is a big-time gambler himself. He is known to bet on teams playing sports and on himself playing practice rounds against his competitors for huge amounts of money. He loves to gamble. In fact, I think a lot of his mystique and popularity with a lot of the male fans around this country, if not the world, is based on the fact that Phil loves to gamble on the course and off the course. He gambles with his shots, big tournaments. He will go for broke. But in this case, you can't tell me that Phil didn't know this was classic insider trading. But somehow he's going to wiggle off this hook here. I was an innocent bystander. I'm sorry, I'm not buying that. And just for the record, just to be totally objective here, Mickelson is also tied to a federal money laundering case ongoing. This is sources told ESPN last year, in which a California man is accused of transferring almost $3 million as part of an illegal gambling operation. The nearly $3 million is alleged to be Mickelson's money. Once again, Mickelson has not been charged with a crime and is not under federal investigation. It's just another indication that maybe he's not exactly what a lot of people believe that he is or he is portrayed to be. So I don't trust this. I don't trust Phil's image completely. And I'm not sure how he escaped some kind of punishment here. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I deeply appreciate your insight on this matter because I know how much you watch sports, the sport of golf, considerably more than me. And I know that you've always proclaimed that you thought he came across as a phony. I appreciate that level of consistency. I certainly believe the same exact thing for the same exact reasons. His smile has always turned me off a little bit. I always felt like, he just had that look about him that, he wasn't what he portrayed himself to be. And I remember, I look at Tiger and some of the things that Tiger went through. And I'm wondering, what if Tiger was involved in something like this?
Yep.
How would the news have been received? I'm thinking about NBA and NFL players. If they were involved in something like this, how would it be perceived? I'm thinking about the cushion that the sport of golf gives, particularly to the chosen few. And I think Phil Mickelson definitely falls under the category of the chosen few, Skip, where he's the lovable dude, the affable dude, the one that everybody, loves to root for and doesn't have a problem with, et cetera, et cetera. But this is gambling. If you remember, Skip, we made a big deal. Michael Jordan was worth over $100 million. He went to Atlantic City to gamble years ago in the 80s. And you had folks that wanted him thrown out of the league because of it, for crying out loud. But you don't hear a thing about Phil Mickelson. This is it definitely appears to be a classic case of insider trading. He's going to get off. I mean, it's a total of $1.03 million. Really made $931,000, and then the interest tapped onto that. But he gets to just give the money back and then walk away scot-free, having all of these associations. And then if you want to take the macro perspective, Skip, ask yourself for a second. Tell me how something like this could potentially and detrimentally affect the NFL. Remember, we just discussed a few weeks ago how the Raiders are contemplating, or at least trying to move to the city of Las Vegas. You have folks in Las Vegas who would love that. You have others who have questions about it. Why? Because if a golfer is gambling, could you imagine what players may do? Ultimately, somebody is going to get themselves involved in gambling in Vegas. That's just the perception that it is, and it may be a perception that the league doesn't want. Me personally, in this day and age, I wouldn't stop it because the league is already associated with gambling in some capacity with fantasy football and all of this other stuff going on. But I will tell you that the negativity that would come associated with other athletes and other sports, it doesn't touch the chosen few. And Phil Mickelson is one of the chosen few. So we could sit here and lament all day long about how guilty we think he is, how there's no way on earth he was oblivious to the fact that this was insider trading and he had no clue and he's an innocent bystander in all of this. First of all, he ain't innocent because he was clearly paying off a gambling debt. Let's just call it what it is. He's clearly paying off a gambling debt. But secondly, and more importantly, for him to sit up there and say, you know what, I didn't know anything, and to not be charged because he hasn't been charged or anything like that, maybe ignorance is bliss after all, or at least pretending to be ignorant.
I am with you, and yet I saw a poll the other day that indicated that still Tiger and Phil are the two most popular golfers in golf, and obviously Tiger's barely still in golf. Phil hasn't won a major since the British Open, but still playing occasionally at a very high level. But that's what you need to know about this case. Will it affect his image? Phil is beloved. Tiger is still beloved in ways, too, more as a golfer. Phil is beloved more on and off the course, I believe, than Tiger still is, obviously.
Definitely, but it raises a few red flags there, at least for me personally. He's 17th in the world right now. How about the Cavs, though? They make it 10 for 10 in the playoffs, but is this a good or bad thing when they get to the finals? We'll get into it.
I think you like me like that.